Hi all and good morning. Whoa, this is too much. Glad to see you here. This is an amazing day for me. My name is Moshe and I manage the local chapter for the Cloud Security Alliance. And I'd like to welcome you here to the Cloud Security Alliance Summit. This is an amazing day for me because, first of all, this year we celebrate 10 years for the Cloud Security Alliance. And actually, this is about 10 years since I started my cloud journey, like give or take 10 years ago. I moved from the comfort of my job in the enterprises and like many other Israelis, moved to entrepreneurship, was involved in different startups. And something else happened like give or take 10 years ago. It was the beginning when we realized what public cloud can do for us. Around 2007, 2008, in the startup scene in Israel, we still were buying hardware, especially if you were a startup that is building stuff for cybersecurity or the large enterprises. So 2007, 2008, we were still buying hardware, building data centers, doing stuff really traditionally. And around 2009, 2010, we started to realize the power of the public cloud. And it gave us, first of all, the power to fail fast, which is very important for you, for guys who are doing startup, that are doing entrepreneurship, and they're really trying to build something new. And when you fail slowly, it takes you time, effort, it consumes the strength that you have and the ability to build stuff fast on top of public cloud and also to fail fast, to understand that things are not working as you want. That gave us amazing power. We were able to shift from a different business plan, change the products that we are working on, and basically it was an amazing time for us when we started realizing the power of the public cloud. But as our excitement grew when we realized what public cloud can do for us and the amazing stuff that it can do for us, when we got over to customers and we were saying, okay, we want to sell you some enterprise software or cybersecurity software and we are installed on top of a public cloud, the different feedbacks that we got from the customers, that was a real shock comparing to how enthusiastic we were building on top of public cloud. And in 2009 and 2010, I realized that we need to do a big change. And luckily for me, some greater minds than myself also came to the same conclusion. That year, Jim Rivas started the Cloud Security Alliance because he realized that we need a shift of minds. We need to change the way that people looked at different services, the way that you consume different services, because the world is changing. And we saw how consumers' markets, how consumers' applications were doing so well on top of public cloud, while the enterprises were dragging their legs just because of the lack of standards and regulation and everything else that you need to have as an enterprise when consuming new services. So 10 years ago, it was a big change, I think, in the market. The Cloud Security Alliance started. They started to produce best practices, and slowly I saw the market shifting and the change of hearts in the market. 10 years ago, when I started with cloud, people looked at me as crazy. Only the most strangest startups were coming to my lectures, and people were kind of laughing at me. Okay, so when do you finish with this cloud bullshit and you move to something that is more serious? It took like 3 or 4 years, up to 2013, 2014, before I got some serious companies that are bigger than 5 developers coming to my lectures. I still remember the day that I had my first lecture in a bank. This was the first time that a bank was willing to spend some time listening to crazy guys talking about cloud. And 7 years later, in this exact Cyber Week, 2 years ago, we had our first event, which was designated to banks, enterprises, financial institutes, and suddenly you saw how the big journey has basically been completed. Instead of trying to convince people that cloud computing can work and cloud computing can produce better products, that cloud computing has challenges, that's for sure, but it also can bring tremendous benefits. People came to me and started preaching about cloud services and how they can adopt them. So that was a tremendous change. And big part of this change is due because of the Cloud Security Alliance, the way that you manage to educate the market, create the standards, and basically filling the gaps that enterprises needed to board those new services. So with this short introduction, this is a great day for me because it finalized a journey, a 10 years journey from moving from the sides, from moving from the from being somebody that only the weirdest startups talk to, moving to the center stage, moving to the main heart of the business, and basically leading a change for every enterprise that wants to consume new services. So in that spirit, we have set up an excellent day today. We have lectures from the private industry, from banks, from the government. We have very technological lectures. We have some additional lectures on policy and decision making. It's a great mix-up, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. Feel free to ask questions or approach our speakers. They are here to educate. They are here to make sure that you get the message. And with that said, I want to approach our first speaker. I know Damir for years now. He's a senior researcher for the Cloud Security Alliance. And please give him a big welcome. Damir is here to talk with us about security certification. Do you need this mic or the other mic? Okay. Thank you. Good luck. I leave you with the good hands of Damir. Enjoy the day. We worked hard for this. I hope that all of you will enjoy it. Bye.
Oh, all good. Perfect. So thank you for coming. As Moshe mentioned, my name is Damir Savanovic. I come from Cloud Security Alliance. So I work in the CTO office, and I'm happy to be here. As Moshe mentioned, 10 years ago we started, we're here, and I'd like to talk about trust in cloud that Moshe already actually made a great intro. So as of today, cloud is already considered as de facto standard when it comes to outsourcing of IT infrastructure. It gives many benefits, like it gives us flexibility, it gives us the cost reduction in maintenance, increases efficiency. However, what it also gives an opportunity to handle the control over our data to cloud service providers. So for many organizations that raises concerns, and cloud service providers have made great efforts throughout the years to address these issues, to be transparent and provide the information on their security and privacy posture. But we are still, let's say, in the path of building trust in the ecosystem, that the customers trust the providers and that we all see how these things work. So this is an example from Microsoft, but this stands also for many other bigger cloud service providers. It just shows a proliferation of schemes out there where a big cloud service provider would have over 50 different frameworks, standards, certification they will be going through, which is great. I mean, it's a lot of work. And then we ask ourselves, how many SMEs, how many startups who want to be in the space of cloud market, can they afford this? AWS can, Microsoft can, a couple of others also, but then it's just so much of work. And then also cloud users or cloud customers, do they really understand what stands behind each and every logo here? So certification is there to build trust, but how do we achieve it? So at CSA, as one of the many projects that we've been working in the last 10 years, just for information, in the last 10 years, we have published over 200 different research documents that are available on our website. And in Europe, we have started the 3-year project called EUSEC, the European Security Certification Framework. And it's introducing 2 innovations that we are working on. The first one being the multi-party recognition framework for cloud security certifications. And what it means, we're trying to address this proliferation of schemes where, let's say you're a company and you decide, I want to follow NIST 853, or you want to follow ISO 2701, or whatever other framework or scheme you address. What does it mean? How do you reach the requirements of every other industry, government, you name it? So I'll be talking about this a few minutes later. And then the other topic that we also are working on in this project is how to achieve the, let's say, trustful and compliant cloud computing, but on continuous basis. Now, when we talk about certification, when we talk about assessments and audits, they're done either point in time or period in time. An auditor comes, an assessor does it, then he goes away. And then if we are a cloud user, and let's say we work in a highly regulated industry or have very sensitive information, what does it mean for us, like 1 month after the assessment? What does it mean, like, let's say 3 weeks after the assessment? So these are the topics that we were addressing. So the main objectives that we took in this project that we believe is going to raise the trust bar in the market, we said we want to define the principles, rules, and processes for mutual recognition. So what's the idea of mutual recognition? We believe if an organization has, a cloud service provider has a certification, let's say ISO 2701, and then they decide they want to sell their services in Tel Aviv. And they say, okay, we invested a couple of thousands of dollars in ISO 2701, and now we want to sell services on this market. So is it good enough? Are there any specific country requirements that we are not addressing with ISO 2701? And that, let's say we are working as a CSP, we want to sell in the financial industry. Okay, will ISO 2701 fit? We will need any additional requirements. Okay, is this a third certification that we will have to go through, an additional audit? So we are trying and we are building the approach, a framework where we can streamline this effort. So we do one certification, and then by trying to understand what are the differences between all the other requirements, we do that on top. So to do that, we had to build a reference architecture and have all the mechanisms and tools that can achieve that, and also to do it continuously. And then by defining this, we have a process to have this adoption for, let's say, within Europe and then also globally. So by achieving that, we had quite few challenges. So the idea for us is this is a great work, but we need to make sure it gets adopted in the market and it's applicable to whichever industry you're working in, whatever type of organization you are. And as mentioned, we want to do it every day. So for organizations, not to just wait for once per year when the auditor comes or every 6 months, to do it all the time. And as we also understand the security requirements as well as risks, they change. This is a live environment where, for instance, if you take a look at a certain standard, it's issued in 2013, like ISO 27001, and then when is the next time it is going to be updated? For ISO, there's a 4-year cycle where they reassess if there is need, and then like every different standard setting organization has a different rule. But what we're trying to achieve is to have a framework that will quickly adapt to the status on the market. And then obviously to have a set of tools that can support this, not to do it manually in Excel spreadsheets. And so to dig a bit deeper on how we did this, so we started the activities in 2017 where we did like a large desktop research for 1 year. We have been collecting the security and privacy requirements from many different sources, and we were performing a gap analysis to try to understand what are the differences between them. And then the second step was defining the continuous auditing and certification framework and have a governance structure that is going to make sure that our work that was done in 2017 is going to be useful also in 2019, 20, and the years to come. Then we, based on that, we built the tools where we run 4 different pilots to confirm our innovations, if they're working, and I can say that we have successfully run the pilots. I'll share some information after a few slides. And yeah, I'll dig deep a bit into multi-party recognition framework, just to give you a better idea what it is about. And feel free to interrupt me to have questions or comments. I would love to get your feedback, because this is an innovative approach that has never been tried before. So when I said has never been tried before, we did talk with the partners. CSA is a community-driven organization. So some of the partners on the project were also auditors. So we had the ISO certification body working with us, also PwC Germany. And in the advisory board, we had a couple of government representatives and also UI Certify Point. So there is a notion of, so let's say, at least at big 4 companies, they were doing this so-called audits where they would do more than one. But let's say it was proprietary approach that each of the company has developed. So we came up with this multi-party recognition framework, and mainly, as I mentioned, so the challenges we are trying to address, we are trying to get rid of the situation where a company needs to go through 50 different sets of security requirements in order, to prove to cloud users and the regulators that they are compliant. Because obviously, this proliferation, it increases the costs, and in many times it's also a barrier for many smaller cloud service providers to enter certain markets because they just don't have that budget. And then for the users, it's confusing. I'm a startup, I want to do business, and I want to use cloud. And then I say, okay, I take care of my data, okay, and then there are like 30, 40, 50 different standards. What do I go for? Do I look at AWS and Microsoft and the first logo that I remember I will replicate, or what will I do? I mean, that might not be the smartest approach, because we should decide for what fits us best. And for instance, for the organization which have like 50 different assessments, does it increase an attack vector because they have like 50 different people coming doing the assessments? exposing their data centers, and like all that they do to people who, should they really see it? Like, should every customer have the right to audit and come? Well, ideally, yes, but then how do you do it logistically? And then, yeah, just to show you how we address all of those problems is, first, we want to minimize the burden for the providers, because we don't want providers to go through compliance hell. We want them to achieve compliance, and we want them to spend their budget on operational security. We want secure clouds. We want compliant cloud, but not for the sake of compliance, right? So additionally, we want to guide all the other stakeholders to understand how the certification really works. And we want to streamline it. We want to make it simple and as least painful as possible. I know many people, get some pain in the stomach when you mention compliance, but it can be easier. So this is a figure that shows what we have been trying to do. So as you can see, there's a lifecycle project with 3 main steps: evaluate, execute, and govern. And what I was mentioning in step number 1, we have been defining the principles, criteria, and requirements. So what does that mean? So for each standard framework certification out there, we want to have some basic evaluation criteria based on which they can be compared. And then if they meet those principles, criteria, and requirements, we can say they can be comparable. We have all the details in the white papers. I'll be happy to share the resources later where you can read more about it. But generally, when we evaluate all the different, let's say, sources of security requirements, then we can start with the execution phase of the framework, where we do the actual comparison of security requirements, like one by one, when we check and collect the privacy requirements and also the auditing requirements. This is the execution phase, and then on top of that, we need to have, as mentioned, like the change management, complaint management, when the requirements change, when, let's say, an auditor doing an assessment sees that there's a discrepancy, we need to have those things ready. So just to dig a level deeper, this is on the execute phase. Just to give you a high-level idea, and then I could talk about this figure for the next few hours, but I won't. What is important when we do the, let's say, when we do this is actually the life cycle in 5 steps. So first, when we get the request from certification or the standard owner, we get it in, and then we check if it is acceptable. We check if it meets the principles that we have defined, the requirements, the criteria and requirements. And then if those are met, we can actually have a loop to talk with them, to share more information with us. And then when this is done, this is, let's say, the heavy lifting part. In the heavy lifting, we do the comparison of everything. And then we validate it. So validation is, in best case scenario, is done together with the owner of the scheme standard framework. And when not possible, we use the collective intelligence and knowledge of the industry, where we have subject matter experts as part of the CSA community. For instance, a case of ISO standardization doesn't really work. I mean, when you reach out to the standard owner, they have national bodies all around the world. You cannot really achieve like a normal validation by them, because they're just too complex in the organization. That's when we use the SMEs of the certification bodies of our members, where we get the feedback. And then we actually have an output, and what an output is, we have a repository of all security requirements. I will show you on this picture. Here, this is how it looks. So we have all the sources. It can be like from governments, from standards, the good practices, the sector-specific requirements. We collect them and we map all of them to Cloud Control Matrix from Cloud Security Alliance. Just a question to public. How many of you are familiar with Cloud Control Matrix? Okay, quite few. For the ones who are not, Cloud Control Matrix is a meta framework of security requirements which are adopted for cloud security. And Cloud Control Matrix is currently in version 3.0.1, and we are working on version 4 this year, and the plan is for 2020 to have the version 4, which will address also, let's say, the new developments in let's say, in technology like serverless containers, similar. So, with that said, Cloud Control Matrix is already mapped to vast majority of standards and frameworks out there, and all the inputs that we collected, we compared. We did the gap analysis against CCM, and then we had like no partial or full gaps just to understand what are the differences. And then when we matched, we recorded in this repository, and then whenever there were gaps, we were creating the compensating controls, let's say, to close the gaps. And what's interesting, we had like 28 different sources, and over 70% of security requirements that we have compared, there are no gaps. Which means that, you know, in the case when I showed a Microsoft or any other provider, when they do have like 50 different schemes, their work is redundant in 70% of time, 70 plus, which is a shame, a waste of money, waste of resources. Why wouldn't they achieve compliance with one and then add just the 30% extra effort for compliance, and all the other effort, let's spend them on security, operational security. So with that, we believe this is a very strong message that there are too many compliance schemes out there, and which is good that they are, but we need to try to see how we can streamline that. So for the governance, as mentioned, we have the change and complaint management, and the stakeholders which are involved. We have the governance body, which will be, as this framework will go in, go live as of next year. The project is still in its final phases. Governance body is going to be Open Certification Framework Working Group within Cloud Security Alliance. And then other active stakeholders are going to be the standards owner, the authorities that we want to collaborate with to include their security requirements. And then we have the cloud service providers and the authorized auditors who will be actually performing the job. And subsequently, you don't see cloud users, but they are, let's say, at the end, the users of this framework, but they're not actively involved. They just get the benefits, fruits of our work here. So, yeah, this was a quick overview of mutual recognition or multi-party recognition. Maybe just as an information, what CSA is doing on this topic, as we have successfully completed, as I mentioned, 4 different pilots. We did pilots with 2 different ministries in 2 different member states in European Union. We did a pilot with the CASB in Switzerland, and also SME cloud service provider in Austria. And then based on very promising results, we started to run pilots with the GSA in US. So we are doing an independent pilot based on that, together with partners Shellman and Coalfire, and GSA, as I mentioned, a mutual recognition between CSA Star and FedRAMP Moderate. So this is, let's say, the beta testing. Then this was alpha. It was done successfully, and now we are developing this mutual recognition. code name FedStar, and it looks very promising. We'll be happy to share additional information on this later. So, are there any questions on multi-party recognition? Yep. Yep. Yeah, there are no limitations. What we have done in the first phase of the project, we were looking at the schemes that are used in Europe, which also means many international, let's say, security requirements have been collected for that. Let's say the pre-requirement that is needed is that whichever scheme is included in the framework needs to meet the basic principles, criteria, and requirements, so it can be compared with others. Let's say Moshe sets a set of security requirements, and he says, these are my security requirements, and all the companies need to meet them. Okay.
This is usually what happens.
I mean, fair enough, he can do that, he's a great mind, but then we want to make sure he meets certain requirements, so his set of let's say, security controls can be, compared with NIST, with ISO, and other, let's say, recognized standards, so he can get up there. So we make sure the level of quality is achieved.
Thank you very much, Damir.
I have more. Yeah. So, this was on multi-party recognition, innovation number 1. Now I have continuous auditing-based certification.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that was all great, but then, as I mentioned, many companies have a problem of achieving this compliance like continuously, not every 6 or 12 months, but like they want to know what's happening in between. So what we have developed is, again, a framework where we can raise this level of assurance, and we understand that different companies need different levels of assurance. So we have like level 1 continuous self-assessment, then level 2 extended certification with continuous self-assessment, and then let's say the holy grail, the continuous certification. I'll talk about it here. So how this process works? We have an auditee who selects, what's their statement of applicability, what's their publication policy, and how often which security controls they want to work on. And then we have an auditor who selects the tool with which he will work and does the whole process and checks it. So this is like in the initial phase, and then after, let's say, initialization has been done, we have an auditor performing the audit like all the time. He checks the requirements, these are the findings, reports it to the auditee and the governance body, and then, let's say, it is continuously checked and certified. So methodology here that we have built, in the preparation phase, you need to define the attributes which you're going to check, which metrics you're going to use, what's the frequency of checking and scope. So then we collect the evidence, we measure the evidence against the metrics and have the measurement results. We evaluate that against the service level objectives and service quality objectives that we have defined. We have used the ISO 19086 as a baseline for that, and then we have the findings and application. So the pilot that we have run, we have used the CaixaBank, one of the biggest Spanish banks in the sector, where they have said, we have 4 different security requirements that we want to meet. It's data location, encryption, identity federation, and critical logs are in CM. We want that. So what they have said, okay, we want to go for the highest level. They said, these are the requirements, these are the controls that we want to meet, and these are the CCM codes, so the CCM controls that are going to make sure that their 4 main requirements are met. So we've built the architecture where we have 2 different scenarios where their software as a service app is either in a cloud of an SME or in AWS. And then a partner in the project, Fraunhofer Isaac, has an automated tool called Clouditor, also residing in AWS, where they are continuously checking if those four main requirements are met. And then the evidence can either be stored at the premises of the bank, which they prefer, or in an independent evidence store somewhere by, in this case, a CASB. Then at CSA, we're using the StarWatch as the assessment tool for referencing the evidence as such. I won't be saying much more. We're running a bit of time. There's so much content on that. We are running workshops which are freely available in Berlin, October 8 and 9. Whoever is interested, please come and look at it. Look at what we're working. Also, in the collaterals on the table, you have also leaflets on both of the innovations. And just to mention the CSA, with the use of Cloud Control Matrix, we have developed these 3 levels of assurance, with level 1 as a self-assessment, level 2 with a third-party audit, and this here, continuous auditing, is something that we are now actively working on in the working group. So whoever is interested in continuous auditing aspects, you're welcome to join our efforts in the CSA working groups, where likes of you, SMEs in the topics, are developing this area. So just for the conclusion, certification landscape to achieve level of trust is huge. We've seen what's happening, and we want to help the whole industry, the whole ecosystem to, let's say, to align everything. And the CSA Star is, I believe, a great tool to get there. And it's also aligned with the European Cybersecurity Act, which is now the buzz in Europe. We are all talking about that. So we're ready for it. So thanks for listening. And just a couple of resources. The slides will be shared for everything I talked about. It's here.
Thank you, Damir. Excellent